You are listening to Where is the Music podcast. My name is Alberto, and on this program I will talk about music in all its forms. I discuss the creative part, the understanding of music, the role that music has in our culture, our shared life, our psyche, and I will do that with the help of my piano. You can find me on all major podcasting platforms and my work as composer, pianist and teacher at albertoferro.com. This podcast has no sponsor. If you like to support me, click the link to my Patreon page, available in the description. With a contribution as little as few dollars a month, you will significantly help me keep doing what I do. Now, on to this episode of Where is the Music? Hello everyone and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again to Where is the Music podcast. Today I wanted to announce the beginning of a series of episodes around one of my most favorite works in the musical repertoire. This is the Well-Tempered Clavier by Johann Sebastian Bach. I thought it would be a good idea to discuss, let's say, important musical threads throughout a series of episodes rather than on trying to compact one into one single episode. And the Well-Tempered Clavier is perhaps a good beginning. First, I must say that for the past 20 plus years I have been frequenting this work in various ways. But also for the last 1/2 years I've been investigating new aspects of it and practicing, I would say, it more consistently than usually, discovering and enjoying every discovery. I can probably say I've been developing a mild obsession for it. That's possible. But such a huge work, and to a certain extent not so well known, not, I would say, as known as other works by the German composer such as the Brandenburg Concerts or the Goldberg Variations or his cello or violin suites. So this work has some peculiarities that makes it at once unique in its genre, remarkable historically, an accomplishment, I would say, to the level of Dante's Commedia or the Shakespeare's tragedies. And at the same time, quite difficult to encounter and to enjoy plainly through performance. As a matter of fact, this is music quite difficult, quite heavy, at least to hear all at once. We will see why this is the case, and if there is any, let's say, if there is anything at odd with Bach's initial intentions, his creative intentions. So the Well-Tempered Clavier is unique for a variety of reasons. Is first of all a collection of pieces organized in a sort of encyclopedic way. Encyclopedic perhaps ante litteram, because the first proper encyclopedia of the Enlightenment was compiled at the end of the 18th century. We are towards the beginning of the 18th century. There is the interest in Bach in collecting and compiling a sort of book where all the instances of the current music of his time were exemplified. So it is a surprising operation in a sense, because if you study the artistic attitudes of his contemporaries, the earlier 1700, you will find many artists who were trying to just pretty much impose their own stylistic traits. They were less interested in finding out other styles, probably even possible past styles, maybe even foreign styles. They were not so interested as they were to develop their own original, unique, and personal style. Bach has a slightly different trajectory. He is curious about everything that surrounds him. He transcribes a lot of music, for example, famously transcribed Vivaldi, transcribes Parcel and Albinoni, Marcello, transcribes everything that he's able to put his hands on. I mean, these aspects of Bach personality and artistic personality leads us to the second quality of this book, because this is music composed for the express purpose to learn about music, not necessarily to perform it, which is quite odd. What does it mean? It seems that there were particular compositions, many of Bach's compositions, they were written for the stated purpose of being performed even during Mass or during festive celebrations like Christmas or Easter's, talking about the Passions, the cantatas, or other compositions that were supposed to perhaps celebrate a particular event, or maybe a prince or a member of the aristocracy. Other pieces that were supposed to just be entertaining compositions. This one does not seem to fit in any of this category. He makes it clear that every composition is an investigation in a particular style, a particular technique of playing the keyboard, and the technique of composing music, composing polyphonic music. There are references to organ music, a reference to harpsichord, of course. Most of it was composed on a keyboard, on a version of keyboard of the time, which was either the harpsichord or his favorite, personal favorite type of keyboard, which was a smaller and more delicate clavichord. But then the references expand to forms and styles that have more to do with orchestras and vocal ensembles. There is everything in it, and it seems to have created a snapshot at once of the current state of music in Europe. As I was saying, there are references to all the genres and styles of the early 1700s, and also a research book in which composition and performance technique are taken to their limit. He used his own books to teach the most prominent and talented students of his at the time, including some of his sons. You might note Bach had plenty of sons and daughters. Three of them, they later became their own musicians. I'm talking about Wilhelm Friedman Bach and Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. The third, Christian, I forgot his name. The third one is probably just less important. But mainly these two, Wilhelm Friedman and Carl Philipp Emanuel, are remembered in history. They were composers and they published music the time. I would say it's interesting to know that they did not regard their own father with too much admiration. There is a record in which I think it was Carl Philipp Emanuel, although I'm not entirely sure about it. I should double check which one of the two songs happened. But anyway, the story is funny because roughly 20 years after Johann Sebastian's death, Carl Philipp Emanuel was visited for a few days by a music scholar who decided to make a sort of interview and spend some time with the great artist of its time, Carl Philipp Emanuel, who was a remarkable composer in the new galant style, very different from Bach's style, Bach's father style. And so while spending time with him, he noticed there was this very old book on one of his keyboards covered in dust, and so what about this book? And Carl Philipp Emanuel responded something like, well, this is just my father's Well-Tempered Clavier. He dedicated it to me, which is true historically. He dedicated it to me, but I really don't find it particularly interesting. This speaks volumes of the ability of composers of the time to recognize the value of such an important work of art. Sometimes their perspective fails to discover, to appreciate the importance of things that happen right in front of your eyes. And one last characteristics about the Well-Tempered Clavier, this probably is the most known about it, certainly the most talked about it, and in a sense I think it is slightly legendary about it. There is a sort of a myth. This refers to the fact that the Well-Tempered Clavier was the first work to rely on the equal temperament, which is the system by which the octave is divided equally in 12 semitones, making it pretty much exactly what it is today. Every instrument to sound in tune today needs to refer to this system, but it hasn't always been the case. Equal temperament is the result of experiments and discussions throughout centuries. At the beginning of the 1700s, there were a lot of different, slightly different types of tunings. Some were more natural, in therefore having the octave not exactly divided in 12 semitones. If you're not familiar with this idea, it's probably not ideal to spend the necessary time to go into the details today. Just it's important to know that this perfect subdivision in 12 semitones of the octave is not natural. It's not following the way harmonics develop naturally. It's we can talk about it as a sort of adjustment that was possible through mathematical experimentation, and that was pushed by stylistic needs of the time. As a matter of fact, with the previous system, one could only compose in particular tonalities, such as C major, D major, E major, F major. But with this new system, one can compose in 12 different tonalities, minor and major, including C sharp major, C sharp minor, E flat major, E flat minor. So the creative potential just multiplied enormously for composers, and Bach certainly was one of the first to take advantage of it, and we certainly can see the Well-Tempered Clavier as demonstration of its of his intention. He wrote music in both of the books, because, by the way, I didn't mention yet, he wrote two different versions of the Well-Tempered Clavier, and he wrote a pair of prelude and fugue on each of the 12 keys in two modes, so 12 major keys and 12 minor keys. So you will find in C major a prelude and fugue, in C minor a prelude and fugue, in C sharp major a prelude and a fugue, in C sharp minor a prelude and a fugue, and so forth. The result is 48 pieces which compile a single book, and 48 pieces which compile a second book, which Bach finalized 20 years after the first. A couple of words on the term clavier, because well-tempered, we know what it means now. It means equal temperament. But the term clavier refers to generally a keyboard. At this time, it's a harpsichord, and as I mentioned, his favorite keyboard was the smaller clavichord that allowed him more, let's say, articulation nuances, more legato, and even the clavichord allows a little bit of vibrato. Unfortunately, the clavichord is an instrument that in general is quite small. The sound is quite weak, so it's really hard to hear it in a room larger than a small room. So it's very difficult to have it in live performances, while the harpsichord has a much stronger sound. Another keyboard, of course, is the organ. Bach was a master of the organ, and we can see how many compositions have a typically organistic style. Of course, the organ implies pedals, music being played by the feet, but in this case, none of the works involve the feet, involves pedals. So overall, we can say that the work establishes the keyboard as the primary instrument for the creation of music. We know that Bach was a violin player. He was proficient probably in other string instruments. He also played the lute, and he probably sang, but the keyboard was the primary source, the primary way for him to create music. Now, before we enter into the music, I wanted to point out this thing that starts becoming relevant about Bach, not just as a music composer, but as a artistic and intellectual figure in the broader sense. So the figure of composer offered by Bach is one that is multiple things at once. He writes music, he performs it, he certainly uses music to express his religious beliefs. Perhaps we're going to say a couple of things later. He uses music to teach, which means that he writes music to teach music, which is interesting. Music is a way to learn about harmony, composition, techniques, articulation, but probably here training. Not necessarily all the music that he writes has the goal to be performed or to be heard. And this attitude shows how to someone like Bach, the discipline required to become a proficient musician is no different than the one necessary, for example, to read and write, to learn how to read and to understand Latin or Greek, or to learn about mathematics or philosophy. To him, music is a fully humanistic subject. That is one of the reasons why I think his role in the history of music, and more broadly in the history of art, is so important. In the same manner, why Dante's Commedia is not just important because it's a beautiful work of poetry, but is also a work that establishes a language, as well establishes some points about Christian theology and a few other things. So the role of this artist is much more than just create beautiful, interesting, inspiring music, but it seems to spread in other areas of humanistic endeavor. On this note, I'm going to quote a young musician whom I've heard talking about Bach recently. This is from a video I found about Bach called Divine Harmonies, Bach's Metaphysics of Music, and this young musician is called Philip Holm, and it's so interesting because, of course, I will share a link to this in the description, so you can go down the rabbit hole of, if you're interested, of the metaphysics of music in Bach's works. I just want to read it. Bach seems to have been a rather devoted Christian Protestant, and he seems to have the idea that music can almost be divine, or at least summon the divine presence through its harmony and beauty, and might connect such themes with philosophical ideas of people like Spinoza or Leibniz. Bach seems to have said, written at some point, music has a divine purpose. So, continuing on his quote, he brings into the conversation the Pythagoreans, and the Pythagoreans probably were dominant philosophical view of the time. So, to the Pythagoreans, reality was essentially mathematical. Everything is made up of numbers and geometry, a universe of harmonious ratios and pattern. So, to these philosophers, the universe is harmonious, perfectly so. In fact, everything follows the perfect rules of mathematics, and its harmony, a philosophical standpoint, often referred to as the quote-unquote music of the spheres. And ideas of harmony are, of course, directly related to music, which arguably is concerned with harmony in different ways. Thus, to these thinkers, the universe was musical because mathematics and music are intimately connected, being ruled by the same ratios and structures, since music and its harmony correspond directly to the mathematical harmony and ratios, at least for the most part. This means that music somehow expresses the divine harmony at the core of reality. This is quite interesting. The idea that to a certain extent we can represent the universe, its harmony, and the principle that are underneath reality is quite fascinating, and it certainly was very compelling for the Pythagoreans, and it seems that Bach was inclined to believe the same. So I'm gonna perhaps provide some technical, practical, maybe musical evidence to this argument by showing and talking a little bit today about the piece that I chose, which is a fugue. This is from the first book, the C sharp major fugue. By the way, I said in the beginning, this is the beginning of a series, and this might not be the exact beginning. I think it will be recorded as the second episode because the first one started a couple of months ago when I talked about Bach and architecture. In that episode, I explored another fugue from the same book. That time was in D sharp minor. So the piece of today, the fugue in C sharp major, has its own prelude. It is a delightful piece of music. It's very familiar to young pianists as it is usually taken as a speed competition, and I would like to focus on the fugue today, but anyway, I like to play for you the prelude as well. There we go, as I said, quite delightful. But the fugue has more, I would say, deep and interesting aspects to it. First of all, just a quick note on what a fugue is. It is a form, it's a type of a composition that is based on a subject, which is a short melody, and uses its repetitions to draw its own trajectory. The technique used to compose it is called counterpoint, and it's one of the most complex creative techniques, as centuries of history and development. So we will not discuss counterpoint here today. If you want to know more about it, actually there are plenty of resources that go into technical aspects and more refined perspective on it. I would say on YouTube it's quite easy to find material explaining with more detail generally what a fugue is and how it is constructed, and even probably counterpoint. But today we're going to look at musical aspects of it. The most common way to describe the musical trajectory of a fugue is that once the subject is presented, a complementing melody is generated, which now dialogues with it, create a playful dialogue. As a matter of fact, two ideas are now driving the music forward. Composers then play with the creative ways in which such dialogue can happen. You might have this playful dialogue between subject and its complementing counter-subject, or different episodes where the subject generates alternatives of itself. Let's give some example. The subject of this fugue is this one. Nice melody, right? I'll play it again. Now the subject is presented once again. Right? And you see generating a counter subject. Okay, so this is a dialogue of two parts now. I'm gonna play this a little beginning again. Okay, and we can point out at a couple of other ways in which the composer makes these two parts keep on dialoguing between each other. For example, the counter subject might, as I was saying, generating alternatives of itself. So if you recall, the counter subject goes like this. So he goes at some point. You can hear how it has changed, but it's quite similar. These are different versions of the same idea. And while this happens, Bach generates more variations. Right? Other ways, for example, could be the way in which Bach uses the subject to create some more variations. So remember, the subject starts with, right? And what he does at some point is it's all about somehow using the same character, the same melody, in order to create momentum and motion forward. Let's say something about the character of this, because the character is all in the subject. This character is very joyful, youthful, is a very rich subject. This leap up of a sixth is quite unusual, especially because it is one of the rules of counterpoint. I would say that Bach conflicts with more often. This interval is quite large for singers to get in tune, which means that it was avoided. But Bach's perspective in this case is just instrumental. This is another evidence of Bach's keyboard approach, not just a vocal or ensemble approach. He wants to develop instrumental technique, and it also made more challenging by the fact that the articulation of it has to be quite various. Here is legato, and these are gonna likely to be separated notes. Even more difficult from the fact that this is, if you recall, this is in C sharp major. It has 7 sharps in the key signature, a delight to read for sure, and it happens most on the black keys, making it quite tricky for a pianist to perform. And now, before I play a little bit of it, I want you to follow me and listen the harmonic journey. So let me see if I can do this with the microphone right in right place. So the harmonic journey, I think, is the most interesting aspect of it, and I'm gonna play it and I speak you through. Okay, we have arrived at the first landing mark, harmonic landmark, which is the main key, C sharp. This what I played so far is a little period, a little journey up to right here, and from here let's see what happens until the next landmark. This seems to be the next landmark. What is this? This is the G sharp, which is the dominant, and it's the second most important harmonic function within the key. By tonic and dominant, we just simply means two of the 7 notes of the scale. Okay, let's continue. Ooh, this seems to be quite a landmark. We are now in B flat, in A sharp minor. First time that we hear a minor key coming in. Minor, of course, it's a bit more sad. So this was introduced right here. So you see already the minor key creeping in. And now the character has changed from major to minor, but the subject has stayed the same. Okay, we are, as I was saying, in A sharp minor. In this case, we are talking about the 6th note. We started from the 1st, we touched on the 5th, and now the 6th. Our new landmark. Where are we? We are in F minor, actually E sharp minor. I keep getting confused. E sharp minor. Okay, E sharp is the 3rd note. Remember, we start from the 1st, then we touch the 5th, then the 6th, and now the 3rd. Where are we now? We are back to the 1st, number 1. Where are we? This seems like a little landmark, perhaps. We are now on G sharp minor. Again, we are on the 5th. Okay, where are we? Once again, we are on the 1st. to the first, but notice how long it took to get back here. Bach delighted us with a long virtuosic passage, instrumental section, in which you could hear plenty of the subject offered plenty of times in various manners. I'm gonna play this passage again. It goes like this. So we are back to the starting key number 1, and now okay, I've heard this already. This actually is a transcription of the very first episode. It just develops this way. We are on the last page. We are about to end it, but he doesn't follow what is previously done. And now we continue on to a different key. Okay, what key are we? Oh, this is F sharp major. We're now in the chord number 4. To the end. Notice the variety of melodic material under which the subject is sometimes completely covered. You might have heard this thing, this taratan, taratan, taratan. This is coming from the subject, this thing. It's a counter subject, and this little, and then we can find it all over the place. For example, here. You hear that? Again. So. And again. This little free note thingy at some point becomes its own full sequence. It goes like this. Yeah, how interesting. And then the last detail, melodic detail, this skip of sixth. I'm talking about this. This large interval I was talking about earlier, which becomes part of the subject. You see these large intervals, and he takes them often to make it into music. Right? And even later does something similar. Right? And then there is this this beautiful instrumental section where he just goes bananas. So and again. Back to the topic. This is the harmonic journey that he does. We are not just touching on the close keys. This is not just about touching on the tonic, the dominant, and the other closer keys. But this is probably in the light of what we were saying earlier. The ability of music through its mathematical principles to represent sort of divine harmony. This is, by the way, a topic explored and expanded on by the famous pianist and musicologist Robert Levine. There is a truly interesting, remarkable lecture on this topic online. I think it was done during COVID. It's called Bach's Tonal Cosmology and Composing Procedures. If you are curious about knowing in more detail what this is, you will find it there. But the main trait of these ideas is that the representation of cosmic spheres happens in Bach's music by having the subject touching on each corner of the space, the harmonic space in this case, which is the major scale. So the major scale is the harmonic space is this. Each note has its own center. Each of the 6 notes of the scale, if you are wondering why not 7, well, because the 7th one is too weak to make it into its own center, tonal center. I was saying each of the 6 notes of the scale, called the hexachord, becomes the center of a different harmonic sphere around which the musical dialogue orbits. So we found the C, but then we found the G sharp, and then we found the B flat minor, sorry, the A sharp minor, and we found the F minor, the E sharp minor, and then we found different ones. This is still very close, orbiting around the main center. And then we found this instrumental moment where it turned around, probably turn around a variety of keys at once, making it sound like it's going farther and faster toward the center. Then the left hand goes. So this idea of rotating orbits around the center seems to me particularly poignant in the this discussion and conversation about Bach's cosmology. I just want to point out after the richness of this orbiting around and traveling and playfully going around the musical spheres, I found interesting how it ends. It goes, where should I start? It's a very straightforward ending, no unnecessary ornamentation, nor any rhetorical overstatement. It's dry, it's somber, and very convincing. Just gonna leave you with this. I just love the variety and playfulness, and fascinated by the virtuosity of it, and at the same time extremely engaged in this idea that composition such as this one participate in the representation of something higher, can inspire some higher thoughts, some spiritual thoughts, and maybe even a way to see the entire universe. We might agree or disagree, but I find it is such a fascinating concept. I'll add a link to the video of me playing this. This is a video you can follow my hand and also follow the score, so you can probably spot the things that we have mentioned during this episode. I also, of course, add the links to the lecture by Robert Levine, Bach's Tonal Cosmology and Composing Procedures, and also about the video that I quoted earlier called Divine Harmonies, Bach's Metaphysics of Music. So I just want to thank you all for tuning in and staying with me today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have comments or feedbacks or suggestions for musical topics, I would love to hear from you. Please just write a message either through the Spotify platform or on my website. I would love to hear from you, and I just want to thank you again for listening, and until next time here on Where is the Music podcast. You all be well. Bye bye. Thanks for listening to Where is the Music podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, look up for others. I made a few. I publish an episode every week roughly, investigating each time a different aspect of music, the music making, the music listening, the meaning of music, and its relevance in our lives. It is very helpful for me if you like, subscribe, follow on your favorite platform. Where is the Music is on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, TuneIn, and Google Podcasts. If you like to support me, you're free to do so through Patreon, link in description. Thank you again. Until next time.